The alarm came at midnight, when the stars above Seoul were hidden by clouds and the city slept in peace. Deep inside the mountain base, Admiral Una Park opened her eyes before the sound even reached her ears. She had been waiting for this moment for 30 years. She walked through the cold metal hallways, her boots echoing against the floor. Officers saluted as she passed, but she did not stop. She already knew what the screens would show her. She had seen it in her nightmares 1,000 times. The command center was alive with panic. Young soldiers ran between stations, their faces pale with fear. Numbers flashed across giant screens. 3,000 ships. 3,000 alien warships had entered the solar system, and they were heading straight for Earth. Commander Tae Kim stood at the central console, his hands gripping the edge so hard that his knuckles had turned white. He was a good man, Una thought. Brave and loyal, but he had never seen war. None of them had. Humanity had been at peace for over a century. Admiral Tae said, his voice tight. They appeared 2 hours ago near Jupiter. They are not responding to any of our signals. Their speed suggests they will reach Earth orbit in approximately 6 days. Una looked at the screen. The alien ships were massive, each one larger than any vessel humanity had ever built. They moved in perfect formation, like a swarm of metal insects crossing the darkness of space. She had read the intelligence reports about these creatures. The Velk, they called themselves. Conquerors of 47 worlds. They did not come to talk. They came to take. Have they made any demands? Una asked. Before Tae could answer, the main screen flickered. A face appeared, gray and smooth, with eyes like black stones, set deep in a skull that had no nose. No lips, only a thin line where a mouth should be. When it spoke, its voice was translated by the computer into flat, emotionless words. I am High Sovereign Orin of the Velk Dominion. Your species has been observed. Your world has been measured. You have been found acceptable for absorption into the Dominion. You will surrender all military forces, all technology, and all resources. Your population will be relocated to serve the greater purpose of our empire. You have 1 rotation of your planet to comply. If you do not, your cities will burn, your people will die, and your world will become dust. This is not a negotiation. This is a fact. The screen went dark. The room was silent. Una could hear her own heartbeat. She looked around at the faces of her officers. Some were crying. Others stood frozen, unable to move. One young woman had fallen to her knees, her hands covering her face. Una understood their fear. She felt it too, deep in her chest, like a cold hand squeezing her heart. 3,000 ships. Humanity's entire fleet numbered less than 200. Their weapons were designed to fight pirates in small conflicts. Not an armada that had crushed dozens of civilizations. But Una also knew something that none of her officers knew. Something that only 12 people on Earth knew. A secret so old and so dangerous that it had been buried for over 2 centuries. She walked to her private console and entered a code that she had memorized on the day she became admiral. The code had been passed down from admiral to admiral for 250 years. No one else knew it. No one else could use it. A single word appeared on her screen, ready. Tae stepped closer to her. Admiral, what are your orders? Should we prepare for evacuation? Should we contact the colonies? Una shook her head slowly. No evacuation. No retreat. Send a message to the Velk fleet. A message? Tae stared at her. What message? Una turned to face the main screen, where the positions of the alien ships glowed like red dots against the black map of space. Her voice was calm when she spoke, calmer than she felt.
I'll tell them this.
You have been warned. Do not cross the Seoul perimeter. If you turn back now, you will live. If you cross our border, you will cease to exist. There will be no battle. There will be no survivors. You will simply disappear, and no one in the galaxy will ever know what happened to you. The officers exchanged confused looks. The Seoul perimeter was nothing but a line of old satellites, placed there a century ago for basic monitoring. It had no weapons, no shields. It was just a marker, a symbolic border around Earth's home system. Tay leaned closer to Yuna, his voice a whisper. Admiral, with respect, we have nothing that can stop them. Our ships will be destroyed in minutes. What are you not telling us? Yuna looked at him for a long moment. She saw the fear in his eyes, the desperate hope that she had some secret weapon, some plan that would save them all. And she did. But she could not explain it to him. She could not explain it to anyone. Trust me, she said quietly. Send the message. Tay hesitated, then nodded. He turned to the communications officer and gave the order. Within minutes, Yuna's warning was transmitted across space toward the approaching fleet. The response came quickly. High Sovereign Orin's face appeared again on the screen. This time, he was laughing. It was a horrible sound, like stones grinding together. Your species is amusing, he said. We have heard such threats before, from races far more advanced than yours. They are all gone now. Their worlds are empty. Their names are forgotten. In 6 days, your world will join them. Enjoy your final moments, little creatures. We are coming. The screen went dark again. Yuna did not react. She simply turned and walked toward the door. At the entrance, she paused and looked back at her officers. Wake the silent guard, she said, and pray that I am right about what happens next. And she was gone, leaving behind a room full of terrified soldiers who had no idea that beneath their feet, deep in the heart of the mountain, something very old and very powerful was beginning to wake up. Dr. Hannah Cho had not seen the sun in 3 years. Her world was made of stone walls, humming machines, and the soft blue glow of screens that never turned off. She lived 2 kilometers beneath the mountains, in a facility that did not exist on any map, guarded by soldiers who did not officially exist either. When the alarm rang through her laboratory, she was studying the same data she had studied every day for the past decade. Numbers and patterns that made no sense. Signals from something that should not be alive, but somehow was. Her colleague Wu Sung ran into the room. His gray hair wild and his glasses crooked on his face. He was breathing hard, as if he had run all the way from the upper levels. They called the code, he gasped. Hannah, they actually called the code. The Admiral herself. Project Ember is active. Hannah's hands stopped moving over her keyboard. For a moment, she could not speak. She had spent her entire career preparing for this moment, but some part of her had always believed it would never come. That humanity would never face a threat so great that they would need to wake the thing sleeping beneath the mountain. How long do we have? She asked. 6 days? Maybe less. Wu walked to the window that looked down into the main chamber. The Velk are coming. 3,000 ships. The Admiral thinks they will not stop. Hannah joined him at the window. Below them, in a cavern so large that clouds formed near its ceiling, stood the heart of Project Ember. It did not look like a weapon. It did not look like a machine. It looked like a tree made of light, its branches reaching up toward the rock above, its roots buried deep in the earth below. The light pulsed slowly, like breathing, like a heartbeat. They called it the Silent Guard. But Hannah knew that this was just a name humans had given it. The thing itself had never told them what it was called. It had never spoken at all. The door opened behind them. A young woman entered, her dark hair tied back, her face serious. Nari Beek was the youngest member of the team, only 26 years old, but she understood the Silent Guard better than anyone except Hannah herself. The activation sequence is ready, Nari said. But Dr. Cho, are we sure about this? We still do not fully understand what it does. The records from 2089 are incomplete. What if something goes wrong? Hannah turned to look at the glowing tree below. What if something goes wrong? It was a question she had asked herself every day for 10 years. The Silent Guard was not human technology. Humanity had not built it, did not control it, and could not predict what it would do. In 2089, during humanity's first deep space exploration mission, a small ship had found something in the empty space between stars. Not a planet, not a station. Something alive. Something that had been waiting there for millions of years. Watching the galaxy, watching Earth, the crew of that ship had made contact. What happened next was classified so deeply that only 12 people in the entire human race knew the truth. But Hannah was one of those 12. She knew that the thing in the void had offered humanity a choice. It could protect them. It could guard their homeworld against any threat. But only if they asked. Only if they truly needed it. For 250 years, humanity had kept the silent guard sleeping. They had studied it, built this facility around it, and waited. And now, finally, they needed it. "Begin the sequence," Hannah said. Nari nodded and walked to the main console. Her fingers moved across the controls, entering codes that had been passed down through generations of scientists. The glow in the cavern below grew brighter. The humming in the walls grew louder. Wu stood beside Hannah, his old face lined with worry. "Do you think it will work? Do you think it will save us?" Hannah watched the light grow. "I do not know if it will save us. But I know what the records say. The thing that gave us this gift told our ancestors something important. It said that Earth was special, that humans were special, that we had something inside us that no other species in the galaxy had. What did we have?" Hannah smiled, though there was no happiness in it. "The capacity to be both terrible and wonderful, to destroy and to create, to hate and to love. It said that most species were one or the other. But humans were both, and that made us worth protecting." The light below them was now so bright that they had to shield their eyes. The entire mountain seemed to shake. Somewhere above them, Hannah knew. The old satellites that marked the Sol perimeter were coming alive for the first time in 2 centuries. They were not weapons. They were beacons. Markers that told the silent guard where the border was. And if anything crossed that border with hostile intent, the silent guard would respond. Nari's voice came through the speakers. "Activation complete. The silent guard is awake." Hannah placed her hand against the cold glass of the window. The glowing tree pulsed faster now, its light rippling like water, like waves spreading out from a stone dropped in a pond. She could feel something watching her. Not with eyes, but with something older and stranger. A presence that filled the room, filled the mountain, filled the entire planet. "Now we wait," she whispered. "And we hope that when they cross our border, the silent guard remembers its promise." Far above, in space, the Velk fleet continued its approach. High Sovereign Orin sat on his throne, laughing at the foolish warning the humans had sent him. He did not know that beneath the clouds of Earth, something had opened its eyes for the first time in 250 years. Something patient. Something hungry. And it was watching him. The Velk scout ship was small and fast, designed to test enemy defenses before the main fleet arrived. Its commander, a young officer named Jin Ro, watched through the viewport as his vessel approached the invisible line that the humans called the Sol perimeter. There was nothing special about this region of space. Just empty darkness, dotted with distant stars. A few ancient satellites floated nearby, their surfaces covered with dust and age. Jinro almost laughed. This was what the humans called a border. This was what protected their homeworld. "Sir," his navigator said, "we are approaching the marked boundary. Should we proceed?" Jinro leaned back in his command chair. He had conquered 6 worlds for the Dominion. He had burned cities and silenced civilizations. He was not afraid of some primitive warning from an undeveloped species. "Proceed," he ordered. "Let us show these humans what their border is worth." The scout ship crossed the line. For 7 seconds, nothing happened. Jinro smiled, just as he had expected. Empty threats from a frightened species. He opened his mouth to give the order to report back to High Sovereign. Orin, he never finished the order. The scout ship did not explode. It did not break apart. It simply stopped existing. One moment, it was there, its engines glowing, its crew breathing, its commander smiling. The next moment, there was nothing. Not even dust. Not even light. The space where the ship had been was perfectly empty, as if it had never been there at all. Across the fleet, sensors detected the disappearance. Officers looked at each other in confusion. There had been no weapons fire. No energy readings. No attack of any kind. The scout ship had simply vanished. High Sovereign Orin received the report on his flagship, the massive vessel that served as the heart of the Velk Armada. He stood before his command screen, his black eyes narrowing as he read the data. A malfunction, he declared. The scout had old equipment? Send another. Second scout was sent. It crossed the line. It vanished. A third scout. Gone. A fourth. Nothing remained. Now there was fear in the command center of the flagship. Officers whispered to each other. Soldiers gripped their weapons tighter. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. But High Sovereign Orin was not afraid. He was angry, furious. He had conquered half a galaxy. He had crushed species that wielded weapons of unimaginable power. He would not be stopped by some trick, some illusion designed to frighten him. Full fleet advance, he ordered. All ships cross the line together. Whatever is doing this cannot possibly destroy all of us. It was a reasonable assumption. 3,000 warships, each one capable of destroying a planet. The combined firepower of the Velk Armada could crack moons and shatter stars. No weapon in the known galaxy could destroy such a force. The fleet moved forward as one. Ships by the hundreds crossed the Sol perimeter, then by the thousands, and they began to disappear. On Earth, Sturgeon Dayun sat at his monitoring station, watching his screens go dark one by one. Not from damage, not from attack. They were simply overloading, unable to process what was happening. The energy readings were impossible, numbers that should not exist, patterns that broke every law of physics he had ever learned. He called Admiral Yuna on the emergency channel. Admiral, I do not understand what I am seeing. Space itself is folding around their ships. They are being pulled somewhere, but I cannot determine where. Yuna's voice was calm. Keep recording, Sergeant. Everything you can capture. Dayun tried. But his equipment was never designed for this. The sensors showed him fragments, pieces of a picture too large to comprehend. Ships twisting. Stars stretching. Reality itself bending like paper being folded by an invisible hand. On the Velk flagship, High Sovereign Orin finally understood fear. The ship around him was shaking. The lights were flickering. Through the viewport, he could see his own fleet vanishing. One ship after another pulled into something he could not see or understand. The stars outside were no longer fixed points. They were stretching, moving, spinning in directions that should not exist. His crew screamed. Officers ran for escape pods that would never launch. Soldiers fired their weapons at nothing, at shadows. At the walls closing in around them, Orin stood alone at the center of his bridge, watching the darkness swallow his empire. He had conquered 47 worlds. He had killed billions. He had believed himself to be a god among lesser creatures. Now he understood what he truly was. Insect. A speck of dust. Nothing. The last thing he saw before the darkness took him was Earth, blue and small in the distance. So fragile, so weak, so impossibly, terrifyingly protected. Then he was gone, and his fleet was gone with him. In the mountain base beneath Korea, Hannah Cho watched the monitors as the last Velk ship vanished from existence. The entire battle, if it could be called a battle, had lasted 18 minutes. 3,000 warships, 12 million soldiers. Gone without a trace? Wu Sung stood beside her, his face pale. Where did they go? Did the silent guard kill them? Hannah shook her head slowly. I do not think it killed them. The energy signatures suggest transportation, not destruction. It sent them somewhere. Somewhere far away. Somewhere they can never return from. But where? Hannah looked at the glowing tree in the cavern below. It was pulsing slowly again, calm and patient, as if nothing had happened. As if erasing an entire alien armada was nothing more than swatting a fly. I do not know, she admitted, and I do not think we are meant to know. Some questions are not for us to answer.
Above them.
In the empty space where the Velk fleet had been, there was only silence. The stars shone cold and distant. Earth continued its slow rotation around the sun, and somewhere in the void between galaxies, in a place where time and space had no meaning, 12 million Velk soldiers drifted in endless darkness, alive but unreachable. Screaming into a void that would never answer, the Silent Guard had kept its promise. 3 days passed. The galaxy held its breath across 100 star systems. The remaining forces of the Velk Dominion waited for word from their invasion fleet. Their listening posts scanned every frequency. Their fastest ships patrolled the edges of human space, searching for any signal, any debris. Any sign of what had happened to High Sovereign Orin, his 3,000 warships? They found nothing. Not a single piece of wreckage floated in the void. Not a single distress call echoed through space. The fleet had simply ceased to exist, as if it had never been there at all. 12 million soldiers, gone, erased from the universe without a trace. The remaining Velk commanders sent urgent messages to each other. What weapon did the humans possess? What technology could do this? The Dominion had conquered species with planet-killing beams. They had defeated enemies with ships that could bend space and stop time. Nothing in their vast database of conquered civilizations explained what had happened. Fear spread through the Dominion like fire through dry grass. Without High Sovereign Orin, there was no clear leader. Sub-commanders fought for control. Subject species, sensing weakness, began to rebel on a dozen worlds. The empire that had taken 1,000 years to build started to crack. On Earth, Admiral Una Park sat in a small conference room, facing the most powerful leaders in human civilization. Prime Minister Hokong stood at the head of the table, his face a mix of relief and confusion. "Admiral," he said, his voice tight, "you have saved our species. But I need to understand what happened. What did we do? What is the Silent Guard? And most importantly, can we use it again?" Una chose her words carefully. "Prime Minister, what I am about to tell you is classified at the highest level. It cannot leave this room." The other leaders nodded. Defense ministers, intelligence chiefs, scientific advisors. They all leaned forward, desperate for answers. Una began. In 2089, humanity made first contact with an alien intelligence. Not the Velk. Something far older. Something that existed before our sun was born, before our galaxy took shape. It had been watching Earth for millions of years, waiting for us to reach the stars. Waiting for what? Asked General Mirajung. Waiting to see what kind of species we would become. Whether we would be conquerors or explorers. Destroyers or builders. Una paused. It told our ancestors that most species in the galaxy fall into simple categories. Predators or prey. Violent or peaceful. But humans were different. We contained both possibilities within us. We could be the greatest monsters in the universe, or the greatest heroes. And that duality, that potential for both good and evil, made us unique. Prime Minister Ho leaned back in his chair. And this thing offered to protect us? It offered to guard our homeworld. Only Earth. Only against threats that intended to destroy or enslave us. It would not help us conquer. It would not help us expand. It would only defend. And the fleet that just disappeared? Una's expression was grim. The Silent Guard removed them. Not killed, removed. Sent somewhere else, somewhere outside our universe. Maybe outside reality itself. They are not dead. But they will never return. They will never threaten anyone again. The room was silent for a long moment. Finally, Defense Minister Wante spoke. "Can we control it? Can we direct it against other enemies? Use it to secure our colonies?" Una shook her head firmly. "No. The Silent Guard is not a weapon. It is not a tool. It is an agreement. A promise made 250 years ago. It protects Earth. Only Earth. If we try to use it for conquest, if we try to turn it into a weapon of empire, it will leave, and it will not return. How do you know this? Because it told us. When our ancestors made first contact, it made the terms very clear. Humanity would be protected as long as we remained worthy of protection. If we became like the Velk, if we became conquerors and destroyers, the protection would end." The leaders exchanged uneasy glances. It was strange to think that humanity's greatest defense came with conditions, that their survival depended not on military strength, but on remaining decent. Over the following weeks, Earth's leadership made a decision. They would announce to the galaxy that their fleet had been destroyed, but they would not explain how. They would let the mystery grow. Let the fear spread. A message was broadcast on every frequency, translated into every known language. Your fleet crossed our border uninvited. They were warned. They did not listen. What protects Earth does not negotiate, does not threaten, and does not spare invaders. If you come to our system in peace, you will be welcomed as friends. If you come for war, you will disappear, as all enemies of Earth have disappeared since the beginning of time. It was partly truth and partly bluff. The Silent Guard was ancient and mysterious. Even Hannah Cho, with all her years of study, did not fully understand what it was or how it worked. But the galaxy did not need to know that. What mattered was the message. Earth was protected. Earth was dangerous. Earth was not to be touched. The remaining Velk forces retreated from human space. Other hostile species that had been watching humanity with hungry eyes suddenly found reasons to look elsewhere. Trade offers arrived from civilizations that had never spoken to humans before. Alliance proposals. Friendship treaties. Everyone wanted to be on Earth's good side, in her office deep beneath the mountain. Hannah Cho watched the news reports and smiled. Humanity had been saved, not by guns or missiles, but by something that had seen value in them. Something that believed humans were worth protecting. She hoped they could stay worthy of that belief. She hoped the darkness in humanity's heart would never grow so large that the Silent Guard abandoned them. But that was a worry for another day. For now, Earth was safe. The stars were quiet. And somewhere in the void between galaxies, 12 million Velk soldiers drifted in eternal silence. A warning to any species that might ever again. Think of crossing humanity's border. The Silent Guard watched over Earth, and Earth slept peacefully. Beneath its protection, 50 years had changed many things, Captain Sue. Jin stood at the observation deck of the orbital station above Earth, watching small ships arrive from every corner of the galaxy. There were vessels of all shapes and sizes. Some were sleek and silver. Others were rough and industrial. A few were so strange that human engineers could not even explain. How they flew, they all came to the same place. Earth, the protected world. The sanctuary, after the Velk fleet disappeared, word had spread across the galaxy. Earth was untouchable. Whatever power protected it was beyond anything any species had ever seen. At first, this made Earth feared. But over time, fear had transformed into something else. Hope. Refugees began to arrive. Species fleeing wars they could not win. Survivors of conquered worlds. Children orphaned by violence that had burned across star systems for centuries. They came to Earth because it was the one place in the galaxy where no conqueror would follow them. The governments of Earth had debated what to do. Some wanted to close the borders to keep Earth pure and human. But Admiral Yuna, in one of her last acts before retirement, had spoken to the Council with words that changed everything. The Silent Guard protects Earth because we are worth protecting, she had said. If we turn away those who need help, if we close our doors to the suffering, what does that make us? If we become selfish and cruel, how long before the Guardian decides we are no longer worth saving? The Council had voted to open Earth's doors. And now, 50 years later, the planet was home to dozens of species living alongside humanity. Not in perfect harmony. There were conflicts, misunderstandings, and struggles. But there was also something new in the galaxy. A place where enemies could become neighbors. Where old hatreds could slowly fade. Su Jin watched a small transport dock at the station. The passengers who emerged were Velk, not soldiers. Refugees, the children and grandchildren of those who had fled the collapsing dominion after High Sovereign Orin's disappearance. Among them was a young male named Tal. He was smaller than the Velk. soldiers described in history books. Thinner, his gray skin was pale, and his black eyes moved nervously as he stepped onto the station. Sujin walked to meet him. It was part of her job now. She was not only the lead researcher of Project Ember, continuing her grandmother's work, she was also an ambassador of sorts, a face of humanity for those who had traveled far to find safety. "Welcome to Earth space," she said, in the Velk language, which she had learned from her grandmother's recordings. "I am Sujin. I will help you with the settlement process." Tal looked at her for a long moment. There was something in his eyes. Not hatred. Not fear. Something more complicated. "My grandfather was on one of those ships," he said quietly. "The fleet that came to conquer your world? He was a soldier. He believed he was doing the right thing for our people." Now Sujin nodded. She had heard this story before, from other Velk refugees. The weight of history was heavy on their shoulders. "I am not looking for revenge," Tal continued. "I know my grandfather chose his path, but I've spent my whole life wondering what happened to him, where he went. If he suffered..." Sujin was quiet for a moment. She could not tell him the truth. The full truth was still classified, known only to a handful of humans. But she could offer him something. "I do not know exactly what happened to them," she said honestly. "No one does. But I do not believe they were destroyed. I believe they were sent somewhere else. Somewhere very far away. Perhaps they are still alive, in a place we cannot reach or understand." "That is a strange kind of mercy," yes, Sujin agreed. "It is." Later that night, after Tal and the other refugees had been processed and sent down to Earth, Sujin took a shuttle to the surface. She traveled to the mountain facility where she had grown up, where her grandmother had spent her life studying the Silent Guard. The underground complex was quiet now. Most of the researchers had moved to new facilities on the surface. But Sujin still came here sometimes, to sit in her grandmother's old office and think. On the desk was a note, handwritten, that Hanacho had left before her death. Sujin had read it 100 times, but she read it again now. "We are not alone in the universe, but we are not afraid either. Whatever watches over Earth chose us for a reason. Perhaps because we are cruel enough to survive and kind enough to deserve protection. Perhaps both. Perhaps neither. All I know is this. The stars are full of monsters. But Earth has a monster of its own, and ours is older." Sujin set down the note and walked to the window that overlooked the great cavern. The tree of light still stood there, pulsing slowly, unchanged in 50 years. Unchanged, she suspected, in millions. She placed her hand against the glass. Somewhere in that light, something was watching her. She could feel it, the same way her grandmother had felt it. The same way every researcher who had ever worked here had felt it. It was not human. It was not even close to human. But somehow, for reasons no one would ever fully understand, it cared about Earth. It cared about humanity. It had chosen to protect them, not because they were strong or advanced, but because they were interesting. Because they had potential. Because in all the vast darkness of the universe, humans had something worth preserving. Sujin whispered into the empty room. "Thank you. Whatever you are, thank you for giving us a chance." The light pulsed once, slightly brighter than before. Then it returned to its slow, steady rhythm. Perhaps it had heard her. Perhaps it had not. Perhaps it did not matter. What mattered was that Earth was safe. That refugees could find shelter here. That children could grow up without fear of invasion. That humanity, for all its flaws and darkness, had been given the opportunity to become something better. The Silent Guard watched, and deep beneath the mountains of Korea, in the heart of the oldest secret on Earth, a light that had not dimmed in 3 centuries continued to pulse, slow and steady, like a heartbeat, waiting.